What's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back with another first thoughts and initial impressions video. This one will be on Yulha, who was just shown over on Stove, as well as the official Epic 7 YouTube channel. Many of you have probably seen this character floating around over the weekend. She was leaked and data mined, and I was debating doing this video at that time, but the original leaked videos that were put out there were taken down, I believe, on copyright claims. So as a smaller YouTube channel, I decided to play it safe and wait a little bit to kind of release this video until the character was actually fully unveiled officially. So yeah, again, please forgive me if you were expecting this to come out slightly sooner. As with all these videos, I'll just give you my 2 cents on everything, how I think the character is overall, where I think they're going to be used, the things about their artifact. And in this video, we'll actually get to talk about some of the multipliers, because those were actually leaked in that data mine. And I don't suspect that the balance change team is going to actually adjust things like this close to launch. The character comes out Wednesday night, Thursday morning, so I really don't think that they're going to change too much as far as multipliers. So I think we could safely discuss those. So with that little introduction out of the way, let's take a look at the awesome S3 animation, as we always do in these videos.
You'll help me, won't you? Until the very end. Those who stand against me are not worth keeping alive. I have no use for you, so you'll have to disappear.
Yulha in the English dub of Epic 7 is voiced by the really awesome Lara Post. You can hear her as Kasumi in Persona 5 Royale, Fubuki in One Punch Man, Mai in Jujutsu Kaisen, and the one I think that almost all of you are familiar with is Aria from League of Legends. So let's take a look now at her actual stats. Yulha is an Earth Knight of the Sagittarius zodiac symbol. She shares the same stat line with Ambitious Tywin as well as Fallen Cecilia, so very good company to be amongst. Her attack is 894, health is 6,840, 104 speed, 694 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, no effectiveness or effect resistance. Obviously, an incredibly good stat line to have for a knight, especially if it is a tank-oriented knight, which, spoiler alert, Yulha is based on the actual kit. Very high HP, anything near 7,000 is bordering on some of the best in the game. Almost 700 defense is in the same category. Speed is a little low at 104, but knights traditionally don't get too much faster than this. The bulk of them are in this speed range. You're usually not going to see a knight break like 110 speed for the most part. Imprint release here is 12.9% attack to the left and top side units, and the imprint concentration is health percentage, which is very appreciated because this is a character you're going to want to have a lot of health on. So let's actually take a look at the skills now. So her S2 is a passive. It is Malicious Smile. When attacked by a single attack, reflects 30% of the damage suffered to the attacker. Reflected damage cannot be higher than the caster's max health. After being attacked, when health is 30% or less, dispels all debuffs from the caster and activates Murderous Intent. The effect after being attacked can only be activated once every 5 turns. Murderous Intent is a non-attack skill that grants a barrier to the caster for 3 turns and increases the combat readiness of Yulha by 20 to 25% depending on Malagora. Barrier strength increases proportional to the caster's max health. We know from the data mine that the barrier that you get from Murderous Intent is equal to 35% of Yulha's max health, which is fairly substantial. If you were to build this character in the same way that you build a character like, say, Fallen Cecilia, then you're looking at like a 9 to 10,000 health barrier, which is pretty chunky. That is quite a lot. So you will definitely get a lot of mileage out of that. Obviously, it has that built-in cleanse. It's kind of reminiscent of, you know, certain characters like Lionheart Sirmia or like Rem, where certain conditions will just kind of make them snap out of it and go into like this like hyper state. That's all really good. Murderous Intent is like obviously a fine component of the passive, but what really intrigues me is the first part, which is that you get to reflect 30% of single target damage that comes her way into her. So if you have like her guarding a Spectre Tenebria, for example, they have to go through her, which means they're going to take an absolute metric ton of damage. If you've ever played it against Senya, you know that that damage starts to add up over time. And this, I think, is probably better than that. It's also really smart of them, by the way, to have that reflected damage can't be higher than the caster's max health. That's probably to prevent like meme builds. If you remember from like a season or two ago, people were playing Arbiter Vildred, I believe, without a helmet on to lower his health as much as possible, which I think was kind of memey and not really good. I had a feeling that people would do the same to this character because it's 30% of the damage suffered. So if you made her like as squishy as possible to maximize the damage, you might be able to use her like in a cleave situation and just have a character like, I don't know, Watcher Shuri just kind of like implode and kill himself. So I think that's kind of the reason why they did that. It's definitely something that came up in playtesting that they were like, okay, this can't be. Like, we need to have this clause. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of an insane passive. Overall, I still think it's kind of an insane passive because Reflect is a lot, especially on a character that can, again, be as tanky as Fallen Cecilia. So that is really, really good. Next, we'll talk about her S3, which is Symphony of Agony. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 5 to 6 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Attacks the enemy by unraveling Sphere of Sadism, and when the enemy is defeated, recover the caster's health. When the target is not an elite or boss monster, damage sharing effects are ignored. Penetrates the target's defense, but cannot trigger a critical hit. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's lost health, and amount recovered increases proportional to the caster's max health. That's a lot for basically saying this is a different version of Blue Kral's S3. It is very, very similar. The damage multipliers aren't quite as good. Symphony of Agony has a 0.5x attack multiplier, and the damage increases by 0.31 for every 1 HP that Yulha is missing. So, for comparison's sake, Kral has a 0.3x attack multiplier, which is obviously lower, but his damage increases by 0.53571 for every 1 HP missing. So his horse is definitely going to do a lot more damage. A very low health Yulha is probably going to do somewhere between like 9 to 15k approximately, which is pretty good. Just like with Crow Horse, again, it can't trigger a critical hit, and it does penetrate 100% of the defense. I don't believe Krau's horse has the damage sharing effects ignored portion, so you do get that, but usually the horse is enough damage to just like outright destroy somebody. And then also the health recovered if you actually do defeat an enemy with this is proportional. We do know this, equal to 40% of Yulha's max health. So you do get a pretty chunky amount of health here back. It is to kind of make up for the fact that the Crow Horse has the barrier built in. I would rather have the health, but the offset there is that, you know, you do less damage. So it's kind of like a modified version of Crow Horse. Like I said, it's very, very similar to that ability. Think of it like how when we talked about Bellion originally, Bellion's S3 Apocalypse is kind of like a remix of Red Cecilia's Ruinous Retribution. They are very similar in that they provoke all enemies, but Red Cecilia gets a barrier, whereas Bellion gets the defense buff, and they're different. They're better at different points for different reasons. Like Yulha is probably better at executing squishier targets and playing a longer game than Crow, but Crow is a more reliable execute. By the way, the soul burn on Yulha here is consume 20 souls for an extra turn. This is pretty much identical to Blue Kral's. He has the exact same soul burn, so no surprise that it's here. It is a little weird to see this one because one of the cool things you can do with Crow is horse somebody, and if they don't die, then you can just get the follow-up attack, but it's usually with the S2, which is not only a defense buff to protect you, but it also shoves them further back on the combat readiness chain. So his soul burn feels a lot better, a lot more impactful, because you get to basically set up for more incoming damage afterwards, and if you just didn't kill the target, you get another chance as well as pushing them back, which gives you yet another chance. So I really always liked Kral's soul burn for that reason. It just gives you a lot of opportunities to secure a kill and still play defense. I'm less optimistic on it here because Yulha's damage is lower, and as we just previously discussed, her S2 is a passive, not an active component, which means you're only relying on the S1, so you just don't get that same playmaking capability I feel like you would with Crow. I do think it is a fine soul burn. I don't really know what else you would give her, especially when we take a look at her S1 in a second. So again, it's fine. I just, overall, Symphony of Agony just doesn't feel as good as Crow Horse. So basically, if you were hoping that she would just be like a straight up upgrade from Crow, I think this is the area where I think she falls short. Everything else, though, I think makes her better than Crow. And then we're, again, only through the first 2 skills. But I guess we can just kind of take this time to jump and talk about her S1, which is Cruel Touch. It has a 85 to 100% chance, depending on Malagor, to inflict redirected provoke for 1 turn. Damage dealt increases proportional to max health. That scaling, by the way, 0.5x attack scaling, as well as a 10% max health multiplier. Pretty solid multipliers for an S1. Nothing really crazy. It's pretty average overall. Kind of decent, actually, for what's probably going to end up being a tank for the most part. So, again, she's kind of like a remix of Crow. When you think about it, Crow has a provoke on his S1. He has a way to mitigate damage on his S2. And he has an execute on his S3. Yulha is pretty much the same. We have a different version of provoke. In fact, a better / worse, I guess, version of provoke. I guess they just really wanted to introduce more redirected provoke to the format. But this is a character where I think having the guaranteed provoke into her would probably be better. But again, a lot of tanks, Ambitious Tywin, Fallen Cecilia, and Blue Crow all have regular provoke. So I think it's probably more of a stylistic choice, especially since I don't really know this character's lore yet. But she's probably somebody who's more of a villain. So having like a redirected provoke where she kind of like passes it off to her teammates when she's in trouble might be fine. But for the most part, it's probably going to be going into her, which means you're probably going to be getting the reflect damage on it. So that's fine. Again, solid S1. And then the overall kit is, again, just like I said, a remix of Crow overall. So definitely worth pulling. 100% worth pulling this character. Crow is a all-star in Guild War offense, and he still has some viability in World Arena. You do see him picked. It's very rare, but you do see him picked, and there are times and players there where I've seen it have a lot of success. But I would say, again, Guild War is where I think this character is really, really going to shine for the same reasons that Crow does. Crow is just excellent at handling a lot of specific issues that many players struggle with, like Hua Young. Yulha is going to very much be the same way because she's green. She will naturally bait the AI Hua Young to go into her, which means that if she survives, which if you're built tanky enough, you probably should survive it, especially if they don't have attack buff, you're going to get to reflect a huge chunk of that to them. And then when Yulha's turn comes around, you're going to just get to S3 and finish her off and get that big chunky heal to go with your barrier from your S2. So if for nothing else, you should pick her up for the same reason as Crow, which is basically as an exterminator in Guild War offense for Hua Young. Crow has just universally been good the entirety of the game's lifespan. He's always been a relevant pick. So I expect Yulha to be very much the same way. This is a character that will always have value going forward, pretty much forever, unless they like power creep just Crow and that kind of thing entirely. So yeah, definitely pick it up. Now let's talk about her artifact, which is Sphere of Sadism. At the start of battle, grants a barrier to the caster for 2 turns. When attacking with a single attack, if the caster is granted a barrier, damage dealt increases by 10 to 20% based on the artifact's level. Barrier strength increases proportional to the caster's max health. So yeah, this one's a no for me, dog. Like, this character wants to be on Aria. This character is, again, a remix of Crow. Why would you play Crow on anything other than Aria? The character is super tanky, has a massive HP total, so obviously can withstand the damage share. Doesn't mind it, in fact, because by taking a ton of accumulated damage for your team, the Aureus naturally ticks your health lower and lower and lower, which naturally sets you up for the S3 to be used as an execute. Aureus does literally everything that you want the character to do. There's no real reason to use Sphere of Sadism, I feel like, at all on Yulha, unless just for some reason her damage is just way nuts with the thing, and I'm just massively undervaluing how good a 10% max health multiplier is on a knight. So, yeah. The one thing I will say that's really annoying, by the way, is that if it says when attacking with a single attack, why couldn't it have just been when attacking if the caster is granted a barrier, damage dealt increases by 10 to 20%? This would have been the perfect Last Rider Crow artifact. It would have been so good for Last Rider Crow, but they ruined it. As it is now, I don't really know who wants this. Damage dealing Fallen Cecilia probably still wants Arias over this. So pick up one for your collections, because you never know. If it ends up being good, great. If it ends up being a buff, that's also awesome, because you'll have a copy. Probably wouldn't powder shop this. If you roll it, that's really, really good, though, for the most part. Probably, again, a skip for the most part. So, yeah, that's pretty much going to be my thoughts on Yulha as well as her artifact. Again, the TLDR remixed version of Crow, definitely worth pulling. Artifact is nice if you get it, but I don't really think it has a place. Alright, and before I end the video, I really quickly want to highlight this most likely possible source of drama that's going to be coming out in the community. If you guys are not aware, on Thursday with the release of Yulha, they will be offering a recall for Aria as well as her 5-star artifact Scroll of Shadows. And that is because apparently the Apple App Store in Korea has notified Smoggy and Super Creative that Aria and her character design does not align with the App Store policies. The game is rated as 12 plus in their App Store, whereas in the Google Play Store it is rated as 15 plus. Apple does not offer that option. It is only a 12 plus or like a 17 to 18 plus option. And anytime you enter into the 17 to 18 plus category for a game, there's a lot of restrictions placed on it. You're just losing a lot of money in general. You're basically less eyeballs are going to be on the game because it's rated as mature, basically. So again, it's just a huge monetary loss, so they're not going to do that. And since Apple again does not offer this 15 plus option like Google does, then that means they are apparently more susceptible to these kinds of restrictions, in which case again Aria doesn't actually meet these restrictions, so she will end up getting a animation update, I guess you could call it, as well as her live 2D art, as well as again the artifact. All of that will be done. Me personally, I'm not a fan of censorship. Never really been a fan of censorship. I just don't really agree entirely with this decision. I don't really think that there's, I mean, her design is a bit much for sure. That is for sure, but I don't think it's like really that big of a deal. Maybe depending on some of you out there, if you are parents, you would know better than me if there is like, if you would be you would object to your children seeing a character like Aria in a game. And that's kind of why I wanted to highlight this entire section, is I wanted to hear from all of you. Do you agree with this decision? Do you think it's right? Do you think it's wrong? As always, just let me know down in the comments below. Would love to hear from various different perspectives on this issue, because it is a pretty delicate issue. Some people are okay with it. Some people are not. I'm always of the opinion, again, that censorship usually isn't the way to go. And usually I like the original artist to let their intentions just rock. They made it that way for a reason. So yeah, that's going to be it. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I will see you all hopefully in the later part of this week when I try to stream my push to finish an Emperor, as well as another how to play video that I should be dropping in the later part of the week. Thank you all again, and I'll see you next time.